Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Schemel Forum Luncheon, the third of the spring semester. Our Schemel Forum Luncheons are generously sponsored by Munley Law. My name is George Alicio, and I'm the Dean of the Weinberg Memorial Library and the Director of the Schemel Forum. And I'm delighted to introduce today's distinguished speaker with you all, Dr. Cynthia Otto. Dogs are more than just companions. They have been our partners, protectors, and even lifesavers. The bond between humans and dogs is well known and well documented, even stretching into prehistory. For example, the Bone Abercastle dog is a 15,000-year-old archaeological site where a dog was buried alongside two humans. Evidence like this speaks to our deep, almost timeless connection with these remarkable animals. Today, we have witnessed this bond evolve into extraordinary collaborations where dogs use their intelligence, instincts, and especially their unparalleled sense of smell to improve and even save human lives. Dr. Cynthia Otto has dedicated her career to studying and strengthening this bond. She is the founding director of the Penn Vet Working Dog Center, where she has spent over a decade advancing the science of working dogs, from search and rescue to medical detection. Inspired by her experience caring for working dogs at Ground Zero following 9/11, Dr. Otto's vision has shaped a program that has trained and graduated more than 160 working dogs, each going on to make an impact in critical life-saving roles. Beyond her leadership at Penn Vet, Dr. Otto is a world-renowned researcher in canine olfaction, health, and fitness. She has published over 150 papers on these topics, secured more than $8 million in grants, and has received numerous national and international honors, including the AVMA's Bustad Companion Animal Veterinarian of the Year Award and the International Canine Health Award in 2024. Her contributions have advanced veterinary medicine and deepened our understanding of how dogs and humans can work together for the greater good. Today's talk, How Dogs Save Our Lives, will explore the science behind a dog's extraordinary sense of smell and how we have harnessed it to assist in search and rescue, medical detection, and beyond. It will also touch on the special ways in which dogs impact our lives emotionally, reminding us that our relationship with them is not just about work, it's about trust, companionship, and mutual care. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Cynthia Otto.
Okay, great. All right, yep. Let me just switch this out real quick. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Let me get this done and this open. Let's see. All right. So I am really excited to be able to talk about this. I love talking about dogs. I love talking about science. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing the next hour with you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Penn Vet Working Dog Center. I'm going to share a video because I think if you asked me to start talking about it, we would still be here tomorrow. So this is at least a concise overview, and it has some nice images so that you can see kind of what happens every day at the Penn Vet Working Dog Center, which for the students, we do have internships there, and for other people that might be in the Philadelphia area, we do have volunteer opportunities and really an opportunity to get involved one way or another. We're going to talk about olfaction. The sense of smell is so fascinating and so overlooked, so that we really can think about how we use that and maybe start thinking about smelling things in our own world a little bit more consciously. We'll talk about how dogs save our lives, but also how we can save their lives or enhance their lives. So the Penn Vet Working Dog Center, as George said, we opened on September 11th, 2012, is the legacy of 9/11. Okay, and it thinks it wants to do automatic timing. I'm going to pull out for a second so it doesn't make me crazy. Okay. All right. So what we do is we partner with dogs, and I think this is really important. We don't use dogs. We don't, it's not a hierarchical relationship. We're partnering with dogs, and it's for the health and safety of people, animals, and the environment. All right, this wants to go off maybe. This is being very silly. And what we do is education, research, and we really focus on public health and safety. So here's the video that I just want to share with you. Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Otto, Director of the Penn Vet Working Dog Center, and I'd like to share our story with you. The Working Dog Center is inspired by my care of the heroic dogs working at Ground Zero. The center opened on September 11th, 2012, to carry on their legacy and to support the dogs who serve us now. As a donor-driven research and education center, we provide critical tools to enhance the success of domestically raised dogs. Ensuring detection dog health through research on genetics, olfaction, and disease prevention is central to our mission. And we are pioneering means of improving performance through fitness, conditioning, and behavior modification. Throughout it all, our training methods rely on the use of positive reinforcement. As part of the University of Pennsylvania, we take our commitment to education to heart. Every person and dog that works and trains at the center is immersed in a powerful, inclusive, educational culture based on learning and growth. We also collaborate with other programs to advance knowledge of working dogs through the exchange of important ideas and valuable lessons. Our overarching goals are to provide the tools and knowledge to enhance the health and performance of all working dogs and to strengthen their relationship with their human partners. Simply put, our dogs save lives. They are trained to rescue victims of disasters, detect explosives and narcotics, serve and protect our communities, and even sniff out ovarian cancer. Our dogs start their education with general foundations, or as we like to say, their liberal arts degree. Our trainers serve as career counselors, helping to determine the best major for each dog's future. And as a research organization, we record, document, and measure everything so we can refine and share it broadly. The Working Dog Center is self-sustaining through individual, government, foundation, corporate gifts and grants. Gifts of all sizes have an impact. So, how can you help us be friends to man's best friend? Donations are always appreciated, of course, and our volunteer opportunities are virtually limitless. If you're a professional studying working dogs, let's collaborate. All of our canine students live off campus but come to school daily. We're always looking for foster homes where they can continue to learn, love, and grow. Or you can buy one of our dogs as your partner and new best friend. Help our dogs save lives while changing your life through the Penn Vet Working Dog Center. And just so you know, one of our graduates actually works here in Scranton. Wasik is working with the fire department here as an ignitable liquid detection dog, otherwise known as an arson detection dog. So we're really proud to have dogs all over Pennsylvania and actually all throughout the country and even in Canada. All right, let's talk about the sense of smell. Dogs are built to use their noses to experience the world. Just their anatomy, their physiology, their genetics, it all is geared towards taking everything in through their nose. As humans, we're much more visually driven, and we rely on that. And dogs can become more visually dependent if we don't give them that chance to actually use their nose. But when we think about a dog and why they're so oriented to smelling things, the first thing in their anatomy is they have this funny little nose with the slits on the side. Have you ever noticed that? It's like, wow, why do they have that? And that's because they bring air in through the center and they blow it out through the sides. What that does is it allows that air stream to actually facilitate some of their smelling, and as it blows out, it stirs up the little odor molecules and helps make them more available. Once they breathe in, it comes through this nasal passage. They have that. Most dogs have that nice long nasal passage, and they have an area that we call the olfactory epithelium, and that is a very specialized area in their nose. It's all honeycomb shaped, lots and lots of surface area for these odor molecules, what we call volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, to connect with receptors that then trigger this information that goes to their olfactory bulb that processes this. The dog has a relatively large olfactory bulb compared to us as humans. It's probably actually physically the same size as the humans, but their brain is 10 times smaller, so it makes it relatively 10 times larger. So a much more important part of their brain and of their neurostructures. In that olfactory epithelium, we have receptors. We all have olfactory receptors, but dogs have more types and more dense receptors. And so they're able to kind of parse out odors better and more effectively than we are. So they're really set up very well to see the world with their noses. As a matter of fact, I like to say they smell in color. Now, as humans, some of you may recognize that this is a Where's Waldo puzzle. And some of you might be able to identify Waldo, the guy with a little red and white striped hat and glasses. If not, there he is. But think about this. This is what dogs are doing with their sense of smell. They're kind of parsing the entire room. So if they were in here, they would be smelling what you had for breakfast and what deodorant you use and what soap you use and all of it. And they're taking all of that in, and they're also able to kind of ignore some of that and focus on, oh, wait a minute. There's an explosive device in the corner over there, and they're like, I'm on this. I don't care what else is in here. That's what I'm going to focus on. And that's what allows us to be safe. That when we're looking and asking these dogs, in this very complex odor world, they're able to focus in on that odor of interest. And that's just really kind of amazing. But are they the best? Do they have the highest capacity for olfaction? No, they're not the best. And actually, people aren't as bad as we think they are. Sometimes we're like, oh, people can't smell anything. But there are definitely things that people can smell better than dogs. Certain odors people are more attuned to than dogs. But the elephant is phenomenal. They have more genes and are really incredibly adept at smelling and identifying odors. The problem is, especially in Philadelphia, it's really hard to house a whole bunch of elephants and run a program. So, that one didn't work so well. Grizzly bears, they say they can smell something 10 miles away. Yeah, don't get close. But probably not going to be one of our partners in doing olfactory research. Sharks, great sense of smell. They actually even use like electrochemical stuff, beyond our normal smell concept. But again, it's really hard to have a shark screening for, explosives in the airport. It just wouldn't work. Our dogs are amazing because not only do they have an excellent sense of smell, but they cooperate with us. So they take all that information and they share it. Because we know that cats actually are really good at their sense of smell. It's just their cooperation level is a little bit more subjective. So we're not gonna rag on the cats, but dogs really, it works out really well to be a human partner in all of this. And so what do we do with dogs? We have so many professional jobs that we do. And one very common people probably recognize are the protection dogs, so what we typically call our law enforcement dogs. And these are dogs, maybe with the military, maybe with this multi-purpose canine. That's the special operations, secret squirrel guys. They're the ones that are jumping out of helicopters and other things. So we don't see too many of the military dogs or the multi-purpose canines in our normal civilian world, but we see a lot of law enforcement dogs. And these law enforcement dogs come in a couple of different flavors. Most of the ones in our local law enforcement are what we would call dual purpose. And that means that they do patrol work and they do scent work. So it would be very uncommon for us to have a dog that's purely patrol dog and doesn't do some sort of scent work. And the thing about the patrol dog, I really am very sensitized because some people think of them as attack dogs, and they're not. The training that goes into a patrol dog for criminal apprehension is really precise. The goal of that dog, the first goal is to induce people to surrender without ever releasing the dog. And that's actually a pretty common thing. As soon as the officer stands there with their dog and calls out, "Surrender now, I have a dog. If you don't surrender, I will release the dog." And they're like, "Okay, I'm in. I give up." And that's great because that allows us to use less force. It allows everyone to stay a lot safer. But in cases where we do need to use the dog, the goal of the dog is what we call a bite and hold. It is not an attack. It is to restrain that person. And again, to minimize the risk of harm to everybody involved. And so that's something to realize, that there's a lot that goes into these dogs' training. And here in Pennsylvania, these officers and canines, they're actually practicing and doing extra training 2 days out of the month. They're required to do that based on Pennsylvania standards. So they are really trying to stay on top of this and be the best representatives in our community and keep us all safe. So that's just a little PSA for the law enforcement canines. They sometimes get a bad rap, but they're really incredibly important and really valuable. But they also do this odor detection. Usually it's going to be either explosives or narcotics. And then they do tracking. And that tracking can be tracking a fleeing criminal. It could also be tracking a lost person. So that can be utilized in the community. And then this thing called article search. This is the most fascinating thing. They train the dogs to find things that have human scent on them. So if someone is fleeing and throws away a wallet or a gun or something, the dog will actually find that. I had a personal experience. I was working with some police dogs, and I had my glasses on top of my head. And then I leaned over, and then suddenly they weren't there. And I'm like, I lost my glasses. I don't know what to do. And they're like, "We've got a dog that can find, that does article search. He went and found my glasses." And I was like, "Oh, that is amazing." So really, it can be very useful. All right, and so when we're talking, now we're going to kind of focus in on odor detection. We're going to talk about the different types of odor detection. So when we're talking about explosives, there's all kinds of different levels of explosive detection. So we might think about packages or vehicles. And so packages is kind of the more traditional. If you've ever been in DC, they line up the dogs, when they're going into any of the different government buildings, and the dogs are walking by these vehicles checking for explosives. And so that's a really important thing. In a lot of different warehouses and shipping areas, they'll have dogs screening those packages for explosives. Then there's the person-borne. And the person-borne is that somebody actually has it on them. And sometimes in the airports, you might see a dog screening, instead of having to go through the machine. You might be walking by and there's a dog, and you're like, "Oh, that's a cute dog." And not the beagles, but this is on the way in, that there will be dogs screening for explosives. And they're actually more effective than the screening tools the other machines are. So I always feel really good if I'm flying and there's a dog in the screening line, because that's going to make me feel a lot safer. Route clearance is pretty much used in the military, and so the dogs go out in front of the troops and make sure it's safe to move forward. And just, you can't even imagine the number of lives that have been saved as a result of that. So a really important role. Narcotics and drugs, obviously a big component of what our law enforcement canines do. And so they are trained on multiple different kinds of illicit drugs. And so it might be, if there's a new drug on the street, they'll add that to their list. So a dog can learn hundreds of different odors and be able to respond. He might not tell you that this is fentanyl and this is cocaine, but he's like, "That's bad, that's bad. We need to not have those around." Accelerants. This is like WASIC, who's here in Scranton. They are used to go in after a fire and identify what the source of that fire is. Think about that. You have a building that was just burnt down, and somewhere might be a couple of drops of gasoline that started the fire. Everything's already been burned, but the dog can find it. Crazy that they are able to do that. That just boggles my mind that they can figure that out in that kind of an environment. And then contraband. Contraband can be anything that's illegal. It could be alcohol, it could be cigarettes, it could be cell phones. They can be trained on pretty much anything. We can identify a training material to train them on. If we want to train them on cell phones, we train them on cell phones. Oftentimes it's the SD card that they'll train them on. But there's just odors associated with pretty much everything. And so it's just a matter of teaching the dog that is important to us. And we need them to tell us that is the odor that they're smelling. So, and our dogs are, when they're smelling stuff, they're smelling low, they're smelling high. We see a lot of dogs just like checking it all out. And it's just fascinating to watch them work. But what else can they detect? What have you heard about that dogs can detect? Cancer, absolutely. It's a project we've been working on for many years, and it's really exciting to see how dogs are able to tell that there is an odor. So what happens with disease is our bodies change, and there's some odor that changes. We think about it with diabetes. When your blood sugar is out of whack, you might smell like acetone, but there's other things in our bodies that change, and so by training the dogs, we can actually get them to help us understand where those changes are happening and what those odors, they don't tell us what the odors are, but they tell us the odors are there. Any other things that people have heard about? Yeah?
Like emotions, like if the odor is that bad.
There are definitely some really interesting studies in emotions. My postdoc did a study on stress, and she had people do a math test and then took armpit swabs, and the dogs were able to differentiate those that were stressed versus those that weren't. So a lot of that, a lot of our service dogs actually tend to utilize that, we think, to help in their role. And none of the dogs in our program are actually service dogs in that regard, but there are definitely service dogs that use scent and olfaction.
I don't know if it's a factor, but some can sense when something's going to
Seizure alert dogs, we don't quite know exactly what it is. We think there's an odor associated with it, but yeah, that's absolutely out there. So there's all these medical conditions that are out there. So there are definitely some really exciting things. But they can also find humans, all right? So search and rescue. And that is really our basis, where we came from, is our involvement with our search and rescue dogs that were so important. I mean, they've been important for 50, 60 years in this country, but at 9/11, they really got the sort of the spotlight, and it became very apparent that these dogs were an important role. And in search and rescue, when we're looking for live humans, we think about two different environments. One is that urban or disaster environment, so a collapsed building. And it could be because of a natural disaster. It could be like 9/11, a terrorist attack. It could be any kind of accident. We had a chocolate factory in Hershey that blew up a while ago. They were looking for people that might have been trapped in that environment. The wilderness or area search, that's when we're talking about our Boy Scouts and our people that wander off in the woods and get lost, and in bigger environments like that. And so they're a little bit different, the role that those dogs play or the environment that they work in. And then there are human remains detection dogs, what we used to call cadaver dogs. And they're really important in finding human remains, whether it be from a criminal case or somebody that was lost and died. There's also some dogs that they use to find ancient graves, which is kind of amazing to think about, these bodies that have been buried for hundreds or thousands of years, and they're using dogs to try and identify where those graves are. This is a video of one of our dogs doing urban search and rescue training. This is a rubble pile. We love rubble piles. Most people don't, but we love them. And you can see we have all sorts of stuff on that. What you'll notice is this dog is working, and there's live people standing around, and he's ignoring them. He's looking for the live person he can't see. And so it doesn't matter who that person is. He doesn't have a special sense to know that who is there, because in a disaster, we don't know who's missing. And then when he finds them, he barks and barks and barks and barks. And so at that point, then a toy usually pops out. He has a party, and he's like, I won! This is the most fabulous game in the world. And that's really what it's about. These dogs love this, and it's a game for them. They honestly don't care if they're finding live people or human remains. It's not, doesn't matter as long as they win the game. And that's what they're in it for. Here's some other things. Have you ever heard of bed bug detection dogs? If you're traveling a lot to hotels, you might want your own. But so there are lots of places, including some universities. I know will run them through the dorms at the end of the year, and airports and things. There's looking for any kind of problems like that. There's mold detection dogs. We have been recently doing more in the conservation field. Spotted lanternflies, are they a problem up here? Yeah. Yes. Stomp on them. Lucky is one of our graduates who works in Pennsylvania as a spotted lanternfly detection dog, and I'm trying to identify where those eggs are being laid on wood so it's not being transported to other areas. So that's a really interesting area. Smuggling. So there's a lot of dogs, particularly in Africa, that are working to identify illicit wildlife contraband, pangolin scales, ivory, all sorts of other things that are illegal. And they're very effective at helping identify that. And then endangered species, invasive species. So lots of great opportunities for us to utilize the sense of smell. In the medical detection, we are looking at human disease. So we've actually done a couple of studies, one with ovarian cancer, a very deadly silent killer of women. We've also did a pilot study with pancreatic cancer, a nasal cancer that we've looked at. Dogs are able to differentiate samples. We don't train the dogs on people. The dog wouldn't come up and smell you. You would give us a sample, we'd take it to the lab, and they would screen that sample. We're actually also working on animal disease. Currently, the cancer we're working on is a canine cancer, so a cancer of dogs. That's also a silent killer, and we're excited because we're still pretty early on in that, but we're showing that the dogs are able to differentiate the blood samples from dogs that have this cancer called hemangiosarcoma from dogs that don't have it, and dogs that have diseases that aren't cancer. So it's really important to identify that early. We've also worked with chronic wasting disease. So if we have any deer hunters in the crowd, that's a disease of deer that's really devastating. And dogs can tell if a deer, if the feces from a deer smells a certain way, if that deer has chronic wasting disease. So we've been pretty effective at that. And then the environmental diseases, things like spotted lanternfly. We're also looking at a couple of other diseases of some of the tree diseases that are devastating our forests. We're trying to see if we can find out if the dogs can help us in that area. And you're like, wow, that's all magic, and it's like a black box. How do they do it? How do we actually teach a dog to do this? And so I'm going to share a little bit with that. But first I want to explain sort of the big picture concept, what we call odor recognition. So I'm going to use cows because it's just an easy thing to use. If I want to teach a dog to find a cow, all right, here's a cow in the field. Dog goes out, there's a cow. All right. I've alerted to that. Here's the smell of a cow. We have this fancy little, squares and triangles, and that's kind of the volatile organic compound fingerprint, the VOC fingerprint of that, of a cow. All right, we teach the dog, this is the smell I want you to find. He goes in the field, he smells a cow, there's a cow. And he doesn't, it's not like the cow's hiding. He doesn't need to show us where the cow is. We'll see it. But just to get started. So teaching odor recognition is what we want to do. So here's how we start. We have that sample in this container. Dog comes up, puts its nose on it. We click. The click is telling the dog I did it right. I get a treat now. And so we just do that. And we do that. And the dog's like, hey, this is a fun game. I just put my nose on this. I take a sniff. I'm like, you did it right. You get a treat. Super easy, right? That's step number one. Now we have to get to odor discrimination. What if we want to know a Holstein cow from Jersey cow? Right? And the only difference is that they have one different molecule in their odor. And we know everybody's got their own odor fingerprint. Dogs can tell twins apart, identical twins. They have a different enough smell they can tell them apart, which is mind-blowing. But so here's the dog. We can teach them, all right, just tell us where the Holsteins are. We don't care about the Jerseys. Or maybe we're ice cream fans and we care about the Jerseys and we don't care about the Holsteins. So how do we teach discrimination? Well, here in the same sort of setup, we've already shown this is what I want you to do. Now I'm going to introduce a sample from somebody who doesn't have cancer. So we have a sample from a person with cancer, sample from a person without cancer. It's a blood sample. And poor Ivy here is like, I'm doing what you told me. And we're like, it's gotten a little harder. Yeah, she's communicating intensely with us. It's like, what do you want me to do? But they have to process it. They actually have to compute this. And so did she know that that was the right one? Heavens no. That was random. But now she got a reward. And so now she's like, I don't get it for this. I get it for this. Wait a minute. There's something different between these two. And we do this enough times, and she starts to learn that there is a difference. Now, when we just do it with one person in each, it might be that one person had garlic for dinner the night before and the other didn't. And she's like, well, okay, we're training on garlic. So what we have to do is train on lots and lots and lots and lots of different samples. And the challenge when we get into training on lots and lots and lots of different samples is that everybody smells different. So it's not like when we're looking for an explosive that the explosive smells like an explosive, whether it's outside or inside, or if it's, here or there, it still smells like an explosive. But when we're looking for medical detection, we have all of this background noise. And it's different every time because none of us smell alike. And so they have to figure out what's the same or what's similar among these samples. And so here we have, again, lots and lots of variation. We call this odor generalization. So if I train the dog on one Holstein cow, he can find that Holstein cow. But if I want him to find all Holstein cows, I have to train on many, 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 many individuals so that they recognize that it's all Holstein cows, but not Jerseys. All right, so this is also something that we use in search and rescue. It's not quite as hard, but we're looking for hidden people. This is how we start with our puppies at 8 weeks old, and this is the most fun. It's a great game. As they get a little older, we change the environment. They have to work a little harder. They don't see the person running away from them anymore. Find that hidden person. Look at sniffing, 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 sniffing. Very excited by it. And now here's where we have to discriminate, because it's not just any person, it's only hidden people. Because when we're in a disaster setting, there's people all over the place. There's people working. And so they have to say, what we think of is they do inventory. That if we had somebody hidden in this room, they could kind of do inventory. It's like, I got all of you, but there's somebody who's hiding, in that cupboard over there, and they would find that person and ignore all of you after they checked to see what you had for lunch. But it's really, and look at how these dogs move in this kind of environment. Look at the confidence that they have in just traversing this kind of stuff and being willing to play and do that. And that's really an important part of our training as well. So we really focus on their physical activity, their physical health. So the dogs are amazing. And we think about, is this good for them too? Is this something that is valuable for them? Are we doing them a favor by asking them to do these really hard tasks? And my vote is yes. It's a really good thing for them because that mental stimulation, that physical activity, and kind of that partnership is really good for dogs. I think that is something that we can be really proud of. And we wanted to ask that question about the dogs that worked at 9/11 because that was a pretty tough environment to be in, and there's a lot of information about hazards that came out for the humans. And being there, I wanted to make sure we weren't overlooking hazards for the dogs. And so what we did with support from the AKC Canine Health Foundation is we conducted a study. We conducted actually two. There have been many, many parts of the study, but we conducted an immediate assessment of injuries and illnesses that happened on site. And then we did a longitudinal study following 95 dogs that worked at 9/11. We had 55 search and rescue dogs that didn't work at 9/11, and we followed them for 15 years, or until the end of their lives. So this is what we learned about the dogs working at 9/11 and the hazards that they experienced. And the first thing that we found was that the most common thing were cuts and scrapes. And this is universal across every disaster, every response. Cuts and scrapes are the most common thing that our dogs experience. But we were like, oh my gosh, well, what should we do? Should we put booties on them? Should we do all of this other stuff? Well, first of all, in a disaster environment, on that unstable rubble, you put boots on them, and it's like trying to run across cobblestones in high heels. So not going to be the thing that we do. So we really need to think about, how do we protect them? But the other thing, we have to look at these cuts and scrapes. How serious were they? Because these handlers and these dogs are really tightly connected, and they're looking. In all of these incidents of cuts and scrapes, and beyond our study, across all of the responses and all the medical records that we could find from the dogs at 9/11, only 4 dogs needed stitches. So we're not talking real serious stuff. We're talking minor cuts and scrapes. Probably the same thing that happens when your dog goes out in the woods. So really common. Surprisingly, though, respiratory problems were very infrequent in our dogs. And that was the most common thing that we saw in people, because it was a really bad environment. And the dogs are lower to the ground. They didn't have respiratory protection, but they have this wonderful nose that can filter things out, and just their physiology is a little bit different. Because we were able to follow these dogs throughout their lifetime, we were able to look, because we were concerned, like, does it shorten their lifespan? Do we have any issues? Well, we found out that there's no difference between the dogs that went and the dogs that didn't go. And we had similar breeds, which is always important when we're talking about lifespan. And when we look at the normal lifespan of these breeds, and the most common breed was German Shepherds, followed by Labradors, followed by Golden Retrievers, if we compare this 12.5-year average lifespan, it's about 2 years longer than your average pet dog, or the breed standard. And so what that's told me, regardless of if they win or not, is that the search and rescue, that physical activity, the mental activity, all of that stuff is good for the dogs. And it makes me really proud to be part of getting these dogs to that place and then keeping them healthy while they're working. But why did they die? I think that's a big question. It's like, why did these dogs die? And the number one cause of death in both groups of dogs was what we would call degenerative, or old age. So that's great. Number 2 was cancer. That's not surprising. That is typical across all dogs. It's devastating, but it's not surprising. And so when we look at that, when we look at cancer in the dogs, the surprising thing is that respiratory cancers in the dogs that went to 9/11, like very, very few, like maybe 1. More common in the dogs that didn't go to 9/11. So that was a shock. I was like, wait a minute, how'd that happen? We did find that this cardiovascular cancer, which is hemangiosarcoma, one of the most common and devastating cancers of dogs, was common across both. And that is the disease that we're working on right now to see if we can't define that early. We did see not a statistically significant increase in lymphatic cancer, so lymphosarcoma. Lymphosarcoma is one of the most common cancers of dogs as well. We didn't see it in any of our non-deployed dogs. We did see it in our deployed dogs. We kind of have to weigh that a little bit because we had a small group. And because it's so common across all dogs, we might have missed that, but it is common in human first responders that were part of 9/11. So it was something that we were concerned about, but really didn't have strong evidence for. Nonetheless, the cancer rate was not different between the deployed and the non-deployed dogs. This is my very favorite picture from 9/11. This was taken on the pile down at Ground Zero in the middle of the night. And what you can see is we have 3 first responders sitting. And this gentleman over there in the fire hat was more typical of what we would see. Nobody had any kind of response. Emotions were put away. But when Logan and her handler walked by, they lit up. dogs do something to us. They touch us in a way that almost nothing else does. And sometimes I make people stand up and look each other in the eye, and everyone's like, oh my God, don't look at me. And then you show a picture of a dog, and you look them in the eye, and you go, oh. And there's science behind it. It's oxytocin. Dogs are really good at eliciting that bonding hormone, oxytocin, better than we are with each other. Maybe with your child, it's going to work better. But as sort of strangers or colleagues, we're not that good at eliciting oxytocin in each other. Maybe we could work on that. But the dogs are amazing. And not only that, we can give that back. So when we connect with a dog, their oxytocin increases. So we have that relationship, that human-animal bond. And it's so valuable and it's so important. And this was my dog as he was a therapy dog for 14 years at the Ronald McDonald House. And there's just something about, again, how they touch us, how they make us smile, how they kind of just let us step away from the stresses of our world. And they know. And they're just so good at that. But we also have the responsibility to them. We are responsible for making sure that their lives are as good as they make our lives. And so this is where sort of my research science and my clinical world come together. I am a board certified canine sports medicine veterinarian. How many people have even never heard of such a thing? I mean, it's a relatively new field. But it's so cool and it's so important because what it is, it's about how dogs move. Yes, we're focused on canine athletes, but our professional dogs are athletes. I think of it as performance or mobility. Because what we know about all dogs is if they're going to die of old age, one of the things that happens in old age is they can't get up and they can't move anymore. And that's what ends their lives. And our goal is to keep them moving and keep them comfortable and keep them pain-free as long as we can so we can keep that bond and we can keep it good for all of us. And so sports medicine, we're talking about physical fitness. We're talking about preventing injuries and treating injuries. This is one of our dogs, and so you can see that most dogs don't climb ladders or cross ladders like this. This is part of our training. But the other piece of this is body condition, the ideal body condition. Did you know that, I don't know what the numbers are currently, 60 or 70% of pets are obese? It's an epidemic, and it's a real problem. And so when we think about body condition scores, it's hard sometimes to equate what a normal body condition score is. This is our canine athlete, all right? Equate to the human athlete. But the thing is, you can see they have muscles. They're defined. They have a waist. So they really do have that athletic build. We can have the body condition score, it's on a 1 to 9 scale. 9 is morbidly obese. All right, 1 is what we would call cachectic or absolutely too thin. For our athletes, we want them to be a 4, a maximum of 5. I'm not gonna shame anybody. I'm not gonna ask you to score your own dogs, but think about it. But the question becomes, it's like, oh, come on, they're not gonna be they're not a show dog. I don't really care. But a body condition score of 5. If you compare that to a body condition score of 7, okay, so look at that. It's not hugely different, but notice there's a tuck behind the ribs. You can actually you should be able to feel your dog's ribs as you would feel your knuckles. So everybody take your hand out. Relax your hand, feel the top of your knuckles, okay? Flip it over, now try and feel your knuckles through the meaty part of your hand. That's too much extra meat on your dog. You should be able to, but don't, if you do this and the ribs are sticking out like that and you can feel them like across the room, that's too thin. But you shouldn't have to dig to find your dog's ribs. There should be an indentation, so they might look good in a bikini. They should have what we would call a tuck underneath their belly. They should have 6-pack abs. This is more typical of our pet dogs. And I'm going to throw the veterinary profession under the bus and say we're really bad at telling you your dog is overweight. But I think the other question is, If I told you that I could give your dog 2 more years of life, quality life, and I had a drug, I had a magic pill, would you buy it? Yeah. What if I told you that not only am I not going to charge you for the pill, but I'm going to save you money and give your dog 2 more years of life? The difference in lifespan between dogs that are at a body condition score of 5 versus 7 is 2 years. Why? Because the extra weight accelerates arthritis. It accelerates inflammation. And so that's really important to think about, is that it's not about, show, it's about quality of life, it's about longevity, it's about everything that we need to think about. So food is not love if we're overfeeding. So really something to take home and pay attention to. That's something you can do for your dog now. And it's really hard, and I know because my husband is constantly feeding our dog. And I'm like, stop. But he's also aware of body condition, and he's like, okay, only 1 peanut right now. Okay. All right, so then we want to think about all of our fitness and all of our other pieces that we can do. There's lots of aspects of this, and we're going to bounce through a little bit of this because I want to give you some take-home things that you can do at home. Now, right now, I'm going to ask everybody to think about what they're doing with their body, what their posture is. Everybody needs to look around. All right, who's slouching? Who's sitting up straight? This is something, if everyone can go ahead and slouch. Take your arms over your head. Are you feeling anything engaged? Probably not. Go ahead and sit on your sit bones, so like your mom or the nuns taught you in grade school. And sit up straight, and now go ahead and raise your arms over your head. Can you feel it, that you're getting your core involved a little bit more? Yeah, and so dogs are the same way. They're sloppy sitters if we don't encourage them to sit properly. And what happens is that also causes their core not to be engaged, and that's going to contribute to their sort of lack of ability to maintain their mobility. So we're big advocates of correct posture. So when a dog sits appropriately, their knees should be over their toes. You can see that right there. Their back should be straight. We call it the ski slope effect, as opposed to this whole rounded thing and kind of like all over the place. So that is something that we practice with our dogs. Pretty low impact. It's something you can try and work with your dog at home, just encouraging them to sit a little bit more properly. Same with a down. When they're in an alert down, not a relaxed down, they should look like a sphinx. Their knees should be over their toes. Their back should be nice and flat and straight. If they can't do it, there may be a medical problem. Now, we know dogs that have ACL injuries can't sit straight. Their one knee will pop out to the side. So there's some things that this could actually tell us as well. Body awareness. This is super fun. I'm going to make everybody stand up because you've been sitting too long. You can use the back of your chair or use the table or whatever because you're going to practice your body awareness. So what we want to do, and if you're not comfortable on one foot, then use both feet. But what we're going to do is I would say stand on one foot, extend your hands to the side, extend your index fingers, close your eyes and touch your index fingers over your head. And so that's body awareness. And so gymnasts and athletes have really good body awareness. As we get older, we tend to lose some of our body awareness. And it's something that dogs are terrible at. Go ahead and have a seat. Dogs are what we call front wheel drive. They know everything in front of their shoulders, but their back end kind of follows behind. So we do a lot of proprioception exercises so they learn about their back feet. So 4 feet in a box, very technical exercise. If they can get all 4 feet in a box, if they can actually learn to touch something with their back feet, that's progress. Because that's how we train them to climb ladders and walk on things that are unstable. They have to know that they have 4 feet. But most dogs are like, oh, I don't know where my back feet are. So it takes some time and some training to get them to do that. But once they do, it completely changes the picture. This was all in one setting. This dog learned to do this, but she also already knew how to put her feet in a box and put her back feet on something, so she had an awareness. And so I was like, that was pretty amazing. And now, here we take it to the whole next level. The 6-foot ladder is a requirement for FEMA search and rescue dogs to be able to climb that. Notice he climbs every single individual. He's got the core strength to hold his body up. He's got total control. Do not do this at home. Then we're going to take him, he's going to walk across this unstable surface, and he's going to go on what we call a wicket walk. And not only is this wicket walk requiring him to move each individual leg separately, notice that it's 2 2x4s and there's a gap in between. So he has to exactly place his feet in every location. It's like, whoa, that's really scary. And he's like, please let me go, please let me go. I love this. So just watch how he moves his body and how each foot is individually controlled. Yeah, and so that's proprioception training. I'm not going to go through this. I have a fun little video of things you can do at home because I want time to answer questions. I know we went over a little bit, and so I want to make sure we have time for questions. And actually, let me jump to the next one just so I can acknowledge my team. It does take a village. We have an amazing team of trainers and researchers and people to make all of this work. And so questions that I can answer for you. You're the first hands up.
Do you ever use shelter dogs? Oh.
I can also repeat the question. But yeah, do we use shelter dogs? In our program, we do not use shelter dogs here. I can tell you we have lots of programs we work with that use shelter dogs. The challenge with shelter dogs is you actually have to screen about 1,000 dogs to get a dog that is at the performance level that we're expecting. These are like Olympic athletes. We do use community science dogs in that we have people bring in their pets and do some of the studies with us. But in the program for raising and training these dogs, we're interested in the genetics, we're interested in the performance. So at this point, we're not using shelter dogs. But a great question and a common one.
You mentioned the genders that you tend to work with. Are you finding any differences between the genders?
So great question. We have males and females in our population. I can tell you, and I don't want to embarrass you, but boys always develop a little slower than girls. They're a little more distractible, but otherwise they're pretty much equivalent. It is true, isn't it?
If a dog is sitting in the incorrect position, if they have the wrong posture, how would you gently correct them so that you're not hurting them, but you also want to train them to sit in the correct position?
Right, so great question. How do we actually get a dog that's sloppy sitting to not sloppy sit? There's a couple of tricks that we use, but we never force them. So sometimes it's just a matter of holding a treat that they have to reach for without getting up. Sometimes we actually ask them to sit on a platform that's small enough that they have to tuck in a little bit. So using a step or a platform is probably one of the first things that we might do if a dog is struggling with sitting properly. But it's going to be incremental, so it's a whole training process. Yes?
What breed do you prefer?
What breeds do I prefer?
No, rescues are larger. And then you had your therapy dog, which is smaller.
Yeah, my therapy dog was a 15-pound dog, but he thought he was a big dog. So the dogs that we generally use are medium-sized dogs. We don't like the really, really big dogs. They're more prone to injuries. But the breeds that we use are German Shepherds, Dutch Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and Labradors are the most common breeds. We have had other breeds. We've had a few Goldens. We've had a duck-tolling retriever. We've had a Legato Romano. We've had a couple other breeds. What we find is that the dogs are more likely to be successful if they're a Lab or a Shepherd because they adapt to our crazy, chaotic environment, and they also are more, people are more familiar with them. So when we actually sell our dogs at the end of their training, we sell them to police departments, fire departments, search and rescue handlers. So those, they're more willing to take on a dog that they're familiar with. But yeah, it's not about the breed as much as it is about the personality, because not every Labrador would be successful. I can guarantee that. When we look at our friends at Canine Companions, they have Labradors for service dogs. Those dogs are, we would call bomb-proof. If you've seen the Netflix documentary Inside the Mind of a Dog, there's a dog laying there and a roller coaster is like coming down over its head. It's just like, la, la, la. Our dog's like, what's going on? Someone asked if I brought a dog. I'm like, you don't want one of our dogs in this room. They'd be going around and around and around and around because they don't stop. So it's the personality as much as anything as the breed.
How do you know when a dog's not going to make it to training?
Yeah, so a great question of when is the dog, when does the dog basically drop out of school? We have an amazing 93% success rate of dogs being able to do detection work and go into a professional career, and that's because they get to pick their career. So that makes a huge difference. If we asked them all to be search and rescue dogs, we'd probably have a 40% success rate. So of the dogs, when they don't make it, some of it's medical. So that might be an issue. Some of it's just behavioral, that they're either not motivated, like one of our Goldens would just lie down. He's a therapy dog now. It's very uncommon, and we try really hard to see if there's something that dog likes, and if not, and if they're not happy, then we will go ahead and we will invite the foster to adopt that dog. Or very rarely we'll go beyond that and find a home for that dog.
How long do you train the people who you turn the dogs over to when they go out into service? And do people who train service dogs, is it a uniform process? Are your dogs trained similar to maybe some trained somewhere else?
So 2 great questions. When we sell a dog, we have 2 weeks that they come and spend with us and the dog, because it's really important. We've spent a year to 18 months training this dog in the way that we believe is positive reinforcement and collaborative and cooperative. We want to make sure that handler is also on the same page, because if it's not, we're not giving them the dog. And so that's really important. We also do long-term follow-up. We're constantly in communication with them. And then as far as the training, there is no standard for dog training. And people train very differently. And I think there's a lot of emotion involved with how people train. Again, we use positive reinforcement. We are really about collaboration, cooperative care. And that's, we are successful. We are incredibly successful with that model. Other people are more aversive techniques. They use more punishment. And I can't speak to that because that's not what we use.
I was just wondering, do you get them when they're puppies to start, or do you wait till they're certain years
They
old?
start at 8 weeks of age, and they come into the program at 8 weeks, and they're coming in 5 days a week, and they're starting training, and they're doing their puppy runaways the first week that they're there, and they're moving on. It's so fun to watch these little babies learn, and it's because it's positive reinforcement. It's fun, but we also will train them for 5 minutes, and then they go back and rest because their attention span's about that long.
So you mentioned that you don't really train like typical service dogs, so someone with
We don't train guide dogs. We don't train assistance dogs. We don't train diabetes alert dogs. We did train a few diabetes alert dogs and found that the component of training that was the service component was not in our wheelhouse. We weren't very good at that. We're good at training dogs for professional handlers to take on, and because these are kind of Ferraris.
So if you do you work with any programs that train service dogs? So if a dog didn't pass like the working
We have great relationships. Susquehanna Service Dogs is one of the ones that we work with. We actually just got a dog from them who is now working in our research detection program. It's more likely to go that way than us giving them a dog because our dogs are crazy.
So is your working dog center team mostly like professors, or do students have the opportunity to help out as well?
We have lots of students. We have students come for summer internships. We have students doing summer research projects with us. We have a co-op program with Drexel University where we have students in all different majors come and spend 6 months with us. We love having students in with our program. Vet students, they don't have a lot of time in their schedules because we're actually only open Monday through Friday, pretty much 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Weekends and evenings, the dogs get to go with their fosters and be dogs and play and you know live life large.
Thank you.
I'm looking at this picture. There's only 2 guys up there. Do women make better trainers? No, I'm just looking at this.
Now it is a.
And I don't want to sound sexist, but
No, we definitely have a predominance of female members, and part of it is because women are willing to be paid less. You know, and the animal world, it is heavily female driven. Veterinary school, it's 80% women. You know, it is in the dog world, there is definitely. In the law enforcement world, it is definitely mostly men. So that's why we bring in our law enforcement friends so that we can actually have a little bit more balance. But you know, with our students, we're actually getting a little bit broader representation, which is wonderful. And this is why we have a lot. It's really important for us to bring in volunteers and for people to hide. If the dogs were only finding women when they were hiding, they would only find women. So sorry, guys. So come down and volunteer and offer to hide in a barrel. And you know, and we even bring in children. So the dogs get socialized to children and stuff. So yeah, no, it's a great point. It's a great point. But it is a very heavily women-dominated field.